This week, we've brought the Antiques Roadshow to Cumbria and to Barrow-in-Furness. At first glance, the ruins of an old abbey may seem an odd place to come looking for the origins of a modern shipbuilding town. But, in fact, it was 12th century monks who came to this part of Cumbria and became very much the founding fathers of the town itself and the means by which it earned its living. The whole original prosperity of Barrow-in-Furness sprang from this monastery. The monks, first of all Benedictines and then Cistercians, may have come here originally to convert the heathen masses to Christianity, but they quickly became enormously powerful and wealthy landowners, farmers and architects. They administered law and order, and they were responsible for the early development of the iron mines. The dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII meant the loss of monastic influence in the area, and by the middle of the 19th century, Barrow was still little more than a village. But everything changed with the Industrial Revolution. The coming of the railways, together with easily available iron and coal, and its position on the sea, meant that Barrow was ideally placed to build ships. And so, for more than 100 years, that's precisely what they've done. Here in Barrow, they've built practically every kind of ship you can think of. Ocean liners, oil tankers, battleships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, and now, most important of all, submarines. The Devonshire dock complex behind me is described as the most advanced naval shipbuilding facility anywhere in the world. And it's here that the Royal Navy's new Trident submarines are taking shape. Not far from the Vicar shipyard is the Park Leisure Centre, and that's where we are for the day. Among our experts on pottery and porcelain, we have David Batty. Christopher Payne is our man on furniture this week, while Hilary Kay and Eric Knowles will be covering the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So let's now join our experts with the people of Barrow-in-Furness.
It's made in Whitehaven by the Wilkinson factory, John Wilkinson. And it's a pattern called Marseillaise, which is one of their very favourite patterns. They produced this a long time, and for years and years no one even knew there was a factory at Whitehaven, but an important factory producing pottery coming all around the coast, going over to the Isle of Man and Ireland and America, and this presumably is around locally, was it, this piece?
Yes, it was in Eskdale actually.
Eskdale, yes.
Yes, that's where the old lady lived, in Eskdale.
Yeah. It's part, as you probably know, of a bedroom set.
Yes.
There ought to be a great big basin. Have you got a basin?
No, there isn't a basin.
A shame, but it's nice. Locally here, of course, of interest if people know it's Whitehaven. Yeah. If you get away from the area, people aren't interested so much. And I mean, a jug like that would probably fetch, I don't know, 30, 40 pounds. But locally up here, a piece of local interest is going to fetch 2 or 3 times that.
Always lovely to get something in its original case. Do you know what it is?
I think it's some kind of card holder.
Absolutely right, yes. It's a visiting card case. Not, of course, playing cards, which is often the mistake that's made. Now, there are 2 types, actually, of card cases. One's for gentlemen and one's for ladies.
Yeah.
In fact, the decoration, obviously, is most appropriate for a lady, but in fact, it's not the decoration itself that tells you it's for a lady, but the very size of it. Had it been a gentleman's one, it would have been about that sort of size. So, let's have a look and see. It was actually made in Birmingham. We've got the Birmingham anchor there, where indeed many of these card cases were actually produced. That was one of the major centres of production of them. And the maker, just there, H&T, that's Hilliard and Thomason. Very good Birmingham firm. And the year, in fact, is 1851.
1851.
So it's not bad going. And what is so fantastic is, say, that it is literally as it was made.
Yeah.
Of course, largely due to the fact that it's in its original case. But it's a family one, is it, or?
No, I got it about 2 months ago. I went to a local car boot sale and it was in a box with some other things and just picked it up and just bought it.
How much did you pay for it at the boot sale?
£3.
Not bad, not bad. I think you might see a bit of a return on that. Have you any thoughts as to what it might be worth?
Not at all, no idea.
I would say today, because of its condition, because it's such a pretty one, all in its original case, one's looking at a value in the region of £500.
Kidding.
No, where did you say the car boot sale was?
I'm keeping that a secret.
Right.
My husband calls it the most useless piece of furniture in the house.
Why's that?
Well, it's when you want something out of the bottom, it's too far to get down, and then I only keep china in the top, so it isn't very useful.
Right.
That's what he thinks, anyway.
And what do you use it as at the moment?
Oh, there's a bit of junk in here, usually.
Right. It's been made here as a typical fitted writing desk of about 1830, 1840. Yeah. But do you think it started off life like this?
I've no idea. It belonged to my grandfather, and it had been in the family a long time.
So you've no idea what it really was?
No. No idea.
It was a piano.
Was it really? Gosh.
It's been converted from a piano.
Yeah.
The keyboard would have been in here, and this is fairly obvious, really. They've left this rather conveniently. That would have been for music, but obviously if you're going to write at it, why not leave it for papers and if you're copying notes and things like that? Yeah. All of this has been put in new here.
Yeah.
New. Now, we'll talk about when later. The keyboard section has been taken out of there.
Oh, God. I can see now.
So that's why he said it's a useless piece of furniture.
Yeah.
Because firstly, when you write at it, there's not much room for your knees. But secondly, you've got to move everything and knees out of the way to get in there underneath. Because it was never designed to do that at all.
No.
But the most telltale sign is on the back here. There's a little hole there on both sides where there have been handles to lift it up.
Yeah.
And on the top here, there are hinges, what's left of hinges.
Yeah.
Now, if we come back, keep my hand there, this top section would have hinged upwards.
Oh, yes.
To allow you to get into to tune it, to get into the strings. Because the strings would run through here vertically.
Yeah, fancy that.
So it's, if you like, an early upright piano.
Yeah.
Very, very few of them survive in their original state.
Wow.
For two reasons. One, they were wooden frames, and therefore they went out of tune very easily. So you had to tune them all the time, which is a nuisance, expensive and difficult. And secondly, because the concert piano took over and the flat grand piano became more and more popular. So we have here a typical piece of furniture of the 1840s, converted, I don't know when, into from a piano, an upright piano, into a writing desk. So does it have a lot of value?
Well, it's been in the family and probably stay in the family, and that's all. I wouldn't know about the value at all.
So the value is largely irrelevant to you, probably?
Yes.
However, it's interesting because it's quite an unusual piece of furniture, but these converted pianos, and I've seen square pianos converted in the same way, not worth as much as the original pieces of furniture.
No.
Let's say between £1,000 and £1,500 at auction, something like that.
Fancy that. You know, my husband will be pleased.
This is a Phil May.
Yes.
Who I suppose is probably he's be the best known of this group.
That's
isn't he,
right.
really?
Yes.
But again, this character I think does
now he
turn
appears
up quite regularly, doesn't
absolutely. He usually has a monocle and a tall top hat.
Right. He looks like something out of sort of P.G. Woodhouse.
Yes,
doesn't
absolutely.
He? Gussie Fink novel or something.
That's right. Yes.
And this one I like too. This drawing here by Michael Rusden. I've never heard of him, but it looks like sort of Jurassic Park 100 years ago, doesn't it?
Yes.
But it's a beautiful drawing with all these extraordinary animals. Look at them. I mean, it's the most extraordinary sort of one-eyed, God knows what
absolutely,
it is. Absolutely,
and beautifully done.
Yes.
And the detail is marvellous, isn't it?
Yes, but Steven Spielberg would like that one, I think.
It's true to say, isn't it, that the markings that are attributed to the farms in Cumberland and what was then Lancashire and Westmoreland are still the marks that are used on the sheep on the fells nowadays.
On most of them, yes.
Yeah, and coming from 1849, that's absolutely fascinating.
And here we have, this is an amazing, these are sort of dress design, hats designs, and reminds me of sort of Vivienne Westwood or was that lady who makes those funny hats, Mrs. Schilling.
Yes.
But I love this one here, this lady here, who's obviously either has a rather large behind or interesting style, anyway. And I rather like this one, personally, this Phil May one, which reminds me of Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
And in fact, it is entitled The Joker, so...
yes, that's right.
But
Who do you think that would be? Have you any idea?
I don't know,
No.
but it maybe Jack Nicholson's grandfather. What do you think? I don't know. I mean, you know, Phil May, for instance, can make a great deal of money, and you know, he can make several £100s. And I would have thought that 60 drawings like this, which they probably vary in price from the lesser ones would be £20 or £30, and the more expensive ones might be, you know, £300 or £400. You know, one must be looking at something like £6,000 really for this, for insurance anyway.
Yes, yes.
And possibly more.
From Barrow to the South Seas, it really could be the story of the globe, and it could be the story of Captain Cook, because of course he sailed from Whitehaven. And at the back here, it says, Ferguson's terrestrial globe, engraved by G. Wright, and based on Captain Cook's discoveries. And this globe obviously incorporates a lot of the discoveries that he made. Particularly down here, we have Australia, or as it's called on this particular globe, New Holland.
That's right.
And there are some interesting dates. We can say when it was discovered, New South Wales was discovered in 1770 and so on. There's obviously a story to this, isn't there?
There's a story to this. I'd love to know where it came from, because I've written to the Peabody and all sorts of places like that. My husband had a friend in Norway, and he's very excited by it, but we cannot find out any other globe like this one.
The thing that interests me most is the way that it's mounted. Now, with a lot of globes, they're mounted decoratively to be used in a library, to really be a piece of decoration as much as an object of interest. This looks much more like a piece of sort of physical apparatus. It looks like a piece of laboratory equipment. It has the ability to tilt. And unusually, it has this brass equatorial ring. And it seems to me as if it's going to come to pieces. Does it come to pieces?
Yes, it does.
I'd love to have a look inside. Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible.
Now,
you do have gloves.
I do. Now, with globes, I tend to like to wear gloves, particularly if they don't have a good layer of varnish on, which this doesn't, because I don't want my acid to get in there. So I'm going to take this off, undo the screw at the top. Now, could you hang on to this end?
Yes,
because I need to get to the bit underneath. There we go.
Right.
And it looks as though it'll just lift out.
Yes, that's it.
How this is exciting. Could you move that just to one side for me?
Yes, surely.
Lovely. Now,
Like that?
That's fine. I feel like sort of getting into a time capsule in a way. Now, how does it?
Columbus. That's it. That's it. It comes apart so easily you don't believe it.
Oh,
I rescued
my
that.
goodness me. My goodness. This is absolutely incredible. The whole of both hemispheres have been strengthened by layer on layer of additional paper, but they're all invoices. And they're from, look at this, from a silver maker, Joseph Scammell, Richard Crossley, date, look at the date, 1791. We can date it absolutely precisely. Oh, how fantastic.
It is fantastic, yes.
But this is even more riveting, because it looks to me as if we've got some sort of... Now, what is this? Magnet?
Yes, it's magnetized.
So it replicates the Earth's magnetic field?
Yes.
That is just extraordinary. Well, now it's all beginning to fall into place. Here we have a piece of philosophical apparatus, research apparatus, replicating the Earth's magnetic field, through which then they could perhaps avoid some of the terrible calamities in navigation that had occurred.
This was the point. You could get way off beam and land up in totally the wrong place.
Yes. Well, it's a wonderful, wonderful object. And it really deserves, I suppose, to be in a museum. The globe itself, had it been an absolutely normal terrestrial globe in a normal stand, we would have been talking about perhaps £3,000. But I think with this extraordinary philosophical side to it and the research side, I think we must be talking about at least double that.
when we bought our house 20 years ago, when we came to Barrow, it was in it. It was fastened to the wall very firmly over the front door.
Wonderful.
And it stayed there for years, and then we had to do some repairs to the walls, so we took it down, and it hasn't been put back up again.
That's nice. It's so nice to buy a house and find something sort of which is of interest still there. I don't think it happened today somehow.
No, well, our house was built in 1901, so it's more or less the end of the period.
Right, absolutely. Very interesting. So it's been there since the beginning.
Yes.
When I saw you struggling in with this, I thought it was a piece of William de Morgan's pottery. He's an interesting character. He's a friend of William Morris's.
Yes.
And he set up a pottery in London, making first tiles, but then he went on to make pots as well. And he's become extremely collectible. I mean, very, very high prices.
Yes.
And he was very influential at the time, and other people had a go at doing De Morgan-influenced wares.
Yes.
This one is made by Bermontofts.
Yes, I saw that.
You saw that?
Yes.
They were just outside Leeds.
Yes.
And they were making art pottery from 1882 to 1904. The nice thing about this one is that we've got a full mark on it here.
Yes.
They called it faience, which is actually rather misleading. I mean, faience is a tin-glazed earthenware, which is not what this is at all.
No.
This is just an earthenware. This one, I would suggest, is probably nearer the beginning of the period than the end, nearer 1882 than into this century, and is very, very De Morgan in style.
Yes.
Now, De Morgan didn't originate these himself. He was very much influenced by pottery from Turkey, Iznik, and also to some extent by pottery from Italy. So there were a lot of influences coming together on De Morgan. So what we've got here is a Bermontofts tile coupling a De Morgan tile, which was copying an Iznik piece. So you got a whole lot of links running through.
Yes.
It's a slightly difficult thing to put a price on, and one knows what it would be worth if it was De Morgan, but it's very rare for Bermontofts. But it is very decorative. Yes. My guess is that if it came up for auction, it would fetch somewhere between £500 and £1,000. Something like that, yeah, jolly nice. You better go and buy another house and see what we can find screwed in.
See what we can find from that, yes.
It's very architectural.
Yes.
Very, very simple.
Yes.
And it's just a functional object.
Yes.
Any idea at all where it came from?
Well, it did come from a great house in Yorkshire. I don't know which one. And it was bought by a dealer. And then ultimately it came to my friend.
Right. You don't know how long it's been in that family, the original?
I don't.
No.
But the person that I was in touch with did say it could well have been made for the house.
Right. I mean, it's music to my ears when you say it's come from a great house in Yorkshire,
yes,
because there is one great cabinet maker from Yorkshire. Well, there were several great cabinet makers from Yorkshire, but there's one in particular whose name...
Chippendale,
Thomas Chippendale.
Yes.
And this is exactly the sort of work you would expect from Thomas Chippendale.
Yes, yes.
Now, Chippendale, as you may or may not know, did a series of designs called The Gentleman and Cabinet Maker's Director. The first one was published in book form in 1754. And these, I think it was 3 guineas, the book, and people all over the country ordered the book and used the designs and interpreted them as they wished. And so I'm sure if we looked through the director, we would find a lot of elements on this table which are very similar to Chippendale's work. But just for a minute, just the qualities of this table, the wood, a beautiful piece of mahogany. Lovely, I think it's Honduras mahogany, just at the time when they changed from Cuban to Honduras.
Yes.
Well used and abused, made, of course, as a serving table for the dining room.
Yes.
Imagine somebody coming down and lifting silver entree dishes with kidneys and all sorts of exotic things for breakfast every morning for 200 or 300 years.
Yes.
So I don't think there's any doubt at all about the age of it. It's exactly contemporary with Chippendale's first book, 1755, 1760.
Yes.
The legs are tremendous.
Yes.
I mean, they're just the idea of that triangular shape.
Yes, indeed.
But pierced with these Gothic niches, rather like the Gothic, almost like an arrow slit of a castle, of a turret.
Yes.
But very Gothicized, which matches, if you like, the corner brackets here at the apron, where it looks like a flying buttress of a church roof, a vault of a roof.
Yes.
So very simple, very church-like, and extremely elegant.
as a table, a good 18th century table of this type, very much in the Chippendale manner,
Yes.
I would say it certainly would make at auction between, well, certainly £4,000 to £5,000.
Yes.
Without any doubt at all.
Yes.
And if we can pin it down, I think that figure could be exceeded, possibly even doubled or even trebled, if one could pin it down.
To my mind, things didn't get exciting in the world of pewter until around about 1900. And my eyes light up when I see quite a simple tray like this, but it's the design. And anybody who's watching this programme in the Isle of Man will be shouting the words Archibald Knox, because this pewter tray is a design of Archibald Knox. He, of course, was working for Liberty, and Liberty had introduced his Cymric range of silver at the beginning of the century. But of course, being in silver, it wasn't particularly affordable to most people. So he decided that he would extend the range and make something called Tudoric, which was going to be in pewter, which was, more for the masses. And I like this tray. I've seen it in various forms. In other words, with this well, for example, you often find it filled with turquoise enamel.
That's right.
It's really putting the cart a bit before the horse, because Liberty actually did start introducing Tudoric ware as a result of selling this sort of thing in earlier years. This is German art pewter, and Liberty was busy retailing this type of pewter in his shop in Regent Street, and it sold very well. And I think that's what prompted him to introduce his range of Tudoric pewter. This, I noticed, I've just had a quick peep underneath, is by Orovit, who were relatively short-lived company. I think they were selling in around about 1901, and they were bought out by a larger company of WMF.
Oh, yes.
In about 1905. So it had a very short lifespan, but in that time they did produce some very sort of novel, avant-garde, if you might say, shapes. But just to look at it, one would say, well, what makes this Art Nouveau? Well, it's really very much the sort of the sculptural qualities, this very sort of naturalistic. This clock doesn't really stand. It looks as though it's evolving, doesn't it?
That's right.
It's almost, it's a sort of a fantasy type object. If we can, let's look at the face. It's given a very original treatment. Even the hands are in the form of sort of stylized or opening leaves, aren't they? Can you remember what you paid for the thing?
About £50, I think, and probably about 30 or 35 for that.
Right. Well, they were quite reasonable buys. I mean, this today is going to be worth somewhere in the region of around about 200, 250. Yes. And as for the tray, maybe around about 100, yes. 120 pounds.
But the mouse has a little woolly tail which normally goes missing, and in fact the mouse normally goes missing as well, so it's a great pleasure to see it on the end of this little rod, because we often see them with bits of balsa wood and all sorts of strange things on the end. Well, it actually dates from the 1930s, and it's a German toy made by a firm called Lehmann, who started making toys like this in the 1890s, and their particular speciality was really ingenious novelty toys. She's had a little bit of use. She's a slightly rusty tail, and one of her ears is a little bent. But she's a very early model because she has the painted finish, whereas the later ones came in a sort of slightly matte flock covering.
Right.
And if she ever came up at auction, you could probably expect this little creature to fetch between £500 and £800.
Really?
She's very, very scarce indeed. Particularly rare with her mouse. Great pleasure to see it complete. And so for insurance purposes, you ought to think of having her insured for around about £1,000. Or keep her under lock and key. Okay,
well, we have some nice Beatrix Potter books from the area here. All these are all first editions, and it's very nice that 3 of them are signed. First editions on their own are generally worth about £100 to £150, but when they're signed and inscribed, as these ones are, the price then goes right up to about a couple of £1,000. And so this is a very exciting little cache of books which have been brought here today.
I bought it 30 years ago and bought it at a very good price,
The auctioneer knocked it down to me actually for £3, and I took it out to my car, found it was too big to get in, and a voice over my shoulder asked me if I'd sell the frame, which was not a very appropriate frame, for £5. So I took the painting in £2.
Well done. I've always admired John Terrace's work. I think his use of colour is rather clever. And you can see in this rather sort of loose, almost semi-impressionistic style of paint and his colouring, it sort of betrays his Glasgow training. I think there's something very reminiscent in the style with other Glasgow artists who were working at that time, such as Arthur Melville.
This one actually is Edinburgh.
That's right,
and
yes, as we can see.
We've got the flying buttresses of St Giles Cathedral to help us with locating it, but we have it in a position in our home so that it doesn't have full sunlight, but on the other hand, when the setting sun is on it, those browns and yellows and pale greens and blues, they all bring the thing really alive.
Most of the works I've seen by John Terrace have been coastal views and landscapes rather than street scenes. And I find this somewhat unusual in a way, the subject matter, but a really good picture nevertheless. And certainly its value has increased a little bit from the original purchase price. I think we could certainly look to a figure of 1,500 and perhaps more at auction.
Best news I had today.
Eric, there's one name among glassmakers that keeps on cropping up in the Antiques Roadshow. His name was mentioned last week. We have this glass bowl by him today. Lalique, of course. Now, what was it that makes Lalique so preeminent among glassmakers?
Well, I think he was one of these people who took mass production techniques and applied it to decorative glassware in a way that no other designer had done before. So all of a sudden, these things became affordable. They were never cheap. They were, you know, medium price, but at least for the most part they were affordable. And he had such a fertile design mind. His designs run into literally thousands. He designed everything from perfume bottles, which was his sort of first venture, straight through to ceiling lights. Of course, if you go to Jersey, you'll find an entire church interior designed by René Lalique. Quite a fascinating character.
What about this bowl that's just come in?
I know. I mean, here we are. A wonderful sort of straightforward dahlia bowl. It's called dahlia. It's actually moulded on the underside with the dahlias, and it's quite typical insofar as it has this sort of opalescence. Can you see this sort of milky, pinky blue, which actually does change colour in different lights? Almost his trademark, although some people say he was the only person that knew the secret, and when he died, which he did in 1940 or 45, he took the secret with him. That's not true. I mean, lots of people were emulating
But
him.
I gather, sacrilege of sacrileges, people used to cut those in half and use them as wall lights.
True. I mean, here's a classic example. Here's a shell bowl, and his agents in London were in Knightsbridge in Basil Street. They were called Breves Galleries. And yes, I actually met somebody who worked in there during the 1930s, and if you wanted one of these balls made into a pair of wall lights, they'd simply carve it down the centre, and of course you're left with two hemisphericals, which would then go up on the wall. I mean, if you fancied one of these as a ceiling light, they'd simply drill it in the four corners or three corners, and they'd put a chain, and the thing would sort of hang up there in your living room.
But this is the thing, I mean, it's the car maskets that so many people collect, isn't it? Particularly the vintage car fanatics.
Yes, that's true. You've got a crossover here between the automobilia type collector and the Lalique collector. The record price I've had for a Lalique mascot would be about £22,000.
Wonderful.
My wife found the first plate in a pile of other plates in a junk market, really. And then when she found the first one, I routed through another pile and came across the second one.
The other one. Of course, they're 18th century. It's salt glazed stoneware, and absolutely beautiful. Lovely little pips around here. Get data around about 1780, something like that. That's 210 years or so old. That's wonderful. And in wonderful condition. These usually knocked about and damaged, but it's totally nice. How much did you pay for that?
Well, that's 20 pence for 20 pence each.
Well, you would be ashamed of yourself.
Well, I mean, that's the asking price. It was in amongst pile of other junk plates.
Yes. So it shows it could be done, doesn't it?
Oh, yes.
And the super little jug, this is very beautiful. This is black glazed, I suppose made in Staffordshire, often called Jackfield ware, this very shiny black, wonderful colour, iron-rich clays that bring out this marvellous jet black colour. Doesn't need any pattern, anything on it, just to look lovely like that. A simple and very, very beautiful jug. This is the same purchase?
Well, yes, it was a car boot sale for £2. My wife found that one.
The beautiful little teapot, isn't that super? The shape is lovely. You see that in white salt glaze, sometimes with decorations. This is called a crab stock. A crab stock spout, looks like the stock of a crab, and a handle which is absolutely beautiful. What are the prices of these two?
Well, I bought that on a tray at an auction for £4 for the whole tray.
Well, that teapot I think is probably worth nearer the £100 bracket. Your £4 is a bit well spent. And this jug is a little bit damaged, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. I suppose that's around about 50, 60, 70 pounds, something like that. So your few £4, what is it, £4 something at all?
£6.20.
£6.20 for the total. My God, that's worth a few hundred quid, isn't it?
Hi, David. Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Is that all right? I think it is.
Yes. Yes, right as rain. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, wherever we go, Clarice Cliff creeps out of the woodwork.
I'm slowly learning, but I do find them difficult. Is that sort of
it's a
500?
No, it's more than that. Today it's probably, what, 6 to 9, possibly even 1,000.
Is it really?
I mean, I have to say that, 4 or 5 years ago at the height, it would probably have been about £1,200–1,400. So it's been something of a casualty, I think, of the recession as much as anything else.
This is a conspicuous gallantry medal issued to the Royal Navy, is it not?
Yeah, very special.
But perhaps you don't know, but there were only 72 issued to the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines in the last war. So this is quite something. I mean, a Victoria Cross, of course, is a high award, but down the scale, this is very close to a Victoria Cross. But what can you tell me about it?
Well, it was awarded to my eldest brother.
And this is your eldest brother?
Jimmy.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's at the palace with my mother and father.
Really? He was in submarines, human submarines, was he not?
The two-man human torpedo.
How interesting. And the award that he actually got this for, where was that?
Palermo.
Palermo.
They put a torpedo under the ship in the dock.
Right, okay. And I was looking at some correspondence, and there was a letter.
There was a letter came a few years ago.
In Italian, and that person.
That was the man that arrested them.
Really?
Yes, and he was asking if he had been accorded any honour by the British.
Right.
Because he, as the enemy, thought he deserved it.
I think I should tell you that this medal is that rare that it's worth in excess of £2,000. And I think you should insure it, or at least put it on your insurance for 3.
Well, this is an absolutely fascinating collection of Buddhist bronzes, I must say. They all appear to me to be Sino-Tibetan.
Right.
And either you've inherited them, or you are a serious collector, because they're wonderful things. Do tell me.
They're mostly collected on the hoof. I was a sort of temporary medical officer for various treks in the Himalayas and got a taste for the Himalayan art culture, which I hadn't known about. And
did you go into monasteries and things?
Yes, I stayed in monasteries.
Well, they're a marvellous lot, I must say. Perhaps we can start with this one here. They're all the unifying factor, apart from this little chap who is, I think it looks quite old, actually. And perhaps 17th century or even slightly earlier.
Really? Yes.
It's a lovely, nice, soft gilding to it. This is a little arhat, or Buddhist monk.
Yes.
But if we take that one out now...
A nice, tranquil chap.
It is, yes. It's a super little thing. This one here is interesting because it's this Sino-Tibetan one. It is actually inscribed in Chinese, and it's dated.
Good.
But if you read that, it says it is the Qianlong period here, and it actually gives a cyclical date here. If I look at my little cheat book, I see that it can either be 1770, or if it's then 60 years up, it goes to 1830, but it has to be 1770 because it is Emperor Qianlong period.
Right.
And this is actually quite a common type. You do see a lot of these with dates ranging from 1770s to about 1800.
Right.
Incidentally, you know that there are little paper prayer skulls in each figure, or used to be.
Are they reliquaries at all? Do you get bits
I
of
think so,
saints'
yes.
bones and
Oh
whatnot?
no, I think they're little prayers wrapped in little bits of paper, but it apparently was thought to bring bad luck if you ever took it out. So
really,
don't for God's sake ever open
we
them
won't
up.
open this up and take it out.
That's right.
It's an intact one, which they usually aren't.
That's right.
But this one's intact too.
I think they're all show the same deity, which is Avalokitesvara.
Right.
Right. Which
Sometimes,
in Chinese is Goddess of Mercy, Guan Yin.
Sometimes bears many heads, I think.
I think they vary. It's very complicated indeed. But Avalokitesvara, remember, it's a terribly difficult word to pronounce.
Right.
And I remember a friend of mine he said, well, have a look at Sarah very quickly and you'll get there.
You'll get by, yes.
So have a look at Sarah.
Yes.
Anyway, they're lovely things. I think this one is the most valuable and perhaps worth 1,000. Perhaps you should insure it for £1,200, £1,300, something of that order.
Right.
These two here, less, I suppose that's worth something of the order of £500 to £800. Right. And this about the same, although it's dated. I mean, but it's a fairly common type.
And
anyway, and that little low hand there, I suppose is very sweet, worth £300 to £400,
Right.
something of that order.
Great.
So it's a super collection. Thanks so much for bringing them.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
This, to my mind, is one beautiful little jewel. It's a lustre-decorated bowl, and in the centre we've got these sort of Persian-type characters against these beautiful sort of colourful glazes which have got a sort of lustrous surface. The border is filled with these animals and animals hunting. It's a very busy, very, very busy scene. Is it a family piece?
No, it was bought by my father at a house sale of a very old family friend.
Yes.
And
did he ever tell you how much he paid for it?
No, he didn't. No.
He didn't.
It must be getting on for 30 years ago since it was bought.
Right.
But I've no idea how much he paid for it.
Okay. Well, this particular piece dates from around about 1928, 1929. Wedgwood at this time were busy producing lustre-decorated wares that featured fairies. And they were the work of a lady called Daisy Makick Jones. Now, I know for a fact that this particular design is by Daisy Makick Jones, and I know that in 1928 she was given a book of Persian poems. It was a limited edition of only 55, and the engravings in there inspired her to produce this bowl. Now, the poems in question were the poems of a 12th century Persian poet whose name was Nizami. So, but let's just have a look at this wonderful exterior. You've got these panels with these wonderful flowers. I mean, the colours are just sort of, I mean, you can keep the crown jewels. I'd rather have this bowl. I think it's a real treasure. I really do. And what's more, it's quite a rare thing. I mean, has anybody put a value on it before for you?
No.
Good. I'm very pleased to be the first because I have no hesitation in telling you that this bowl is worth somewhere in the region of around about £1,000.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't say that lightly.
Really?
Yeah.
Bar, Flatten Bar underneath, Royal Porcelain Works, Worcester, and London House No. 1, Coventry Street. Bar, Flatten Bar period is from 1804 to 1813. So they lie happily within that period, and they are absolutely sumptuous. I mean, some of the loveliest groups of these things I've ever seen. Not only lovely paintings of flowers, which perhaps attracted you in the first place, but extraordinary marbling. This is an attempt to do a kind of a marble. I'm not quite sure what marble it is, but it's very, very beautiful. Hand-painted and gilded to simulate marble. And the pots are so beautiful themselves, with eagle handles and these wonderful little pearls The pearls are separately rolled out balls of clay. They're not moulded like some factories used to do. A bar flatten bar used to make their little balls of clay separately and stick each one on. So each one is just that little bit varied. You know, they wobble and they move about, and you get behind them. They're completely separate, handmade pearls. I love the flowers, of course, are superb. That's what drew you to them to start with, isn't it?
Yeah, and the quality of
the painting. The quality of the painting is absolutely outstanding. I'm not too sure who did the painting. There's two possibilities. One is Samuel Astles, who was the chief flower painter at Worcester, running from the end of the 18th century into the 19th century. And the other possibility is William Billingsley, who came down to Worcester during the bar flatten bar period from Derbyshire, and was there until he went off to Wales. But whether they're by Billingsley or Astles, I think the painting is sumptuous on that lovely pale blue ground lay, which is absolutely beautiful. Have you had those a long time?
5 years, I should think.
5 years. Can one ask how much you paid?
About 2,300 for those.
2,300. That was a bold move.
The very first pieces we purchased. I mean, we're just taken with them, so I mean.
Oh yes, you had to
the
have
quality,
them.
everything.
You had to have them. Yeah. Well, for perhaps a little bit of hope on the horizon for you is the fact that in these last 5 years, there's been quite an escalation in the price of bar flatten bar and flat bar and bar the following period. And pieces of this quality are now getting sought all over the world, and the prices have just escalated. I think your 2,300 has probably moved up to 4,000 or 4,500.
Very nice. I'd like to part with them.
Well, of course you won't. But it's nice to know that you're on the right road financially.
Yes,
You're not on the road to ruin.
Yeah.
No,
very nice.
Well, during our day here, we've learned of many associations this area has with famous people. John Ruskin, Beatrix Potter, and I learned today for the first time Stan Laurel of the famous Laurel and Hardy partnership. Stan Laurel was born in Ulverston, 10 miles away from here, in June 1890, and apparently he used to practice his famous lugubrious expressions as a young lad in the windows of the local shops. Well, now, there is today a Laurel and Hardy museum at Ulverston, and they've loaned us one or two personal mementos of his. This was a bowler hat he used at a Royal Command performance in front of the now Queen Mother at the Colosseum in 1947. And this was a cocktail book that apparently he used throughout much of his adult life. Hardly a day would go by without a sundowner mixed from the pages of this book. Now, the partnership of Laurel and Hardy was famous for the phrase, "Another fine mess you got me into, Stanley." Well, apparently, Oliver Hardy never said it. The actual phrase was, "Another nice mess you got me into." Well, correcting that, another nice program they got me into here in Barrow-in-Furness. We very much hope that you'll join us next week at the